flour-dusted deception. Barnaby was a cat of great ambition, but very little luck. He lived in a grand house with a pantry full of mice, yet his stomach was always rumbling. The mice were far too quick for his heavy paws and his predictable pounces. He sat by the kitchen broom, his whiskers drooping, wondering how he might turn a chase into a snack without doing any of the running. Barnaby decided to use his wits instead of his claws. He climbed up to a high wooden peg used for hanging herbs and carefully hooked his hind legs over it. He let his body dangle limp, his head hanging toward the floor. He closed his eyes, let his tongue loll out, and held his breath. To any passerby, he looked quite lifeless, like a fuzzy rug hung out to dry. A young mouse named Pip ventured out from behind a large wheel of yellow cheese. He stopped in his tracks when he saw the cat dangling silent and still. "Oh my," Pip squeaked, his ears perking up as he crept a few inches closer. Has the great terror finally met his end? He looks as stiff as a frozen board and as quiet as a stone. But before Pip could get close enough to Whisker's touch, a shadow fell over him. It was Horatio, the oldest and wisest rat in the house. Horatio reached out and grabbed Pip by the shoulder, pulling him back into the safety of a dark corner. Horatio's gray whiskers twitched with deep suspicion as he looked at the dead cat. "I have seen many things in my long years," Horatio whispered to the trembling mouse. "And I have learned that a cat hanging by his heels is usually a cat with a very hungry plan." They watched from the safety of the wall. After several minutes, Barnaby grew tired of the blood rushing to his head. He swung himself up and flipped onto the floor with a very grumpy thud. Barnaby was not defeated yet. He slunk further into the pantry and spotted a large, open sack of fine white flour. With a mischievous grin, he jumped into the bag and rolled and tumbled. He emerged looking like a ghost, covered in thick white powder from the tip of his ears to the end of his tail. He curled up into a ball on the floor, looking just like a harmless heap of meal. Pip saw the new white mound from across the room. "Look!" he cried to his friends in the walls. "The cook must have dropped a giant pile of delicious flour. We shall feast for a week on such a treasure." He began to scamper toward the white heap, his tiny heart racing with the thought of a belly full of grain. Once again, Horatio stepped out to intercept the young mouse. He didn't run toward the flour. Instead, he stood on a high shelf and peered down. He looked at the white heap very carefully. He noticed a tiny patch of black fur where the flour hadn't stuck, and he saw the very tip of the tail give a tiny, impatient twitch. He caught Pip's tail just in time. Horatio raised his voice so it echoed through the pantry. "That is a very fine heap of flour," he called out loudly. "But I have never known a heap of flour to have ears, nor have I seen a sack of meal that breathes so heavily. You may look like dinner, Barnaby, but you still smell like a cat." Barnaby realized his trick was over. He stood up and gave a massive sneeze, sending a huge cloud of white dust into the air. He stomped away, leaving white paw prints all across the floor. Horatio patted Pip on the head as they watched the cat leave. "Remember, little one," Horatio said, "the wise do not trust a mask, no matter how sweet the meal behind it may seem.